More strong storms are set to erupt through the next several days. This video will talk about the latest risk zones and discuss temperatures.
One Nation weather.
This graphic certainly indicates a ton of lightning that is going to be moving across the country in the coming days. Before I talk about those storms, here's a look at round one of Weather Photo Wars right here on my One Nation Weather YouTube channel. This is something new that I'm trying out where I want to get your input on some of the cool photographs that I take regarding the clouds. Do you like the illuminated cumulus cloud or the shadowy cumulus cloud better? Drop your answer down below, comment your favorite. I would love to hear from you there. With that being said, let's now start this forecast with a look at the jet stream pattern set to traverse the country into the coming days. The main culprit for active weather is going to be the general area of active jet stream conditions moving out of parts of the northwestern U.S. and diving down through the central and north central plains. As we see this jet stream energy, also known as a trough, moving through, we are going to see just enough energy in the atmosphere to help support some storms that will be in elevated coverage in the surface level each day. We will continue to see that general trough moving east by the time we get towards Sunday and Monday. That means that at least some level of a storm chance will get elevated towards the east coast from the same system by the time we get towards Sunday into Monday. Before I dive deeper into specific zones having the best chance for severe weather and flooding in the next couple of days, let's talk about the next several with this future radar overview from the European model. As we go into the Friday, July 11th timeframe, there will be a couple of different areas to watch. In the east, there is going to be a lingering frontal boundary that will extend up and down the coast and even into the Gulf Coast. Isolated to scattered storms can be possible in those zones each of the next few days before we get the bigger system to move in. You can see where that bigger system is set to be, though, as we finish this week, over parts of the north central U.S., the high plains, even as far east as the Great Lakes and Midwest. That's where we are going to see some likely stronger end storms and higher coverages of storms erupting through Friday afternoon and evening. Some will even last into the overnight, and that's where especially even the flood threat could go up. We will see that same system associated with the stronger jet stream energy working its way further east into Saturday. In the Saturday afternoon and evening time frame, there will be some isolated storms still around the east coast, but it will obviously be that system associated with the stronger jet stream energy I've been talking about that will be bringing the heftier coverages of storms and intensity of those storms. From the Great Lakes and Midwest back on down into the southern plains, that's where that front moving out of the north central U.S. will be bringing the higher storm chances. By the time we get towards Sunday, isolated storm coverage will turn more scattered as we see the front starting to weaken, but at least progress into your area in Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. And then by the time we go into Monday, we'll be closer to the East Coast itself, in addition to the far south central U.S., where we get the better chance for storms from this system. Let's now take a closer look at the severe weather and flooding threats, especially set to emerge over the next 48 to 72 hours from this system. Let's start with a look at the Friday severe storm setup. You can see there are going to be a couple of zones to watch for at least a level 1 of 5 marginal risk for severe weather. One is going to be in the east, where especially storms that pulse up during the middle to the late part of the afternoon could briefly go severe with damaging winds. The better threat for the damaging winds, possibly even hail and tornadoes, that's going to be with the level 1 of 5 as well as level 2 of 5 slight risk erupting in parts of the plains and the Midwest. Honing in on the peak part of the threat, we can see that the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted a 15% chance of damaging winds within 25 miles of a point in the slight risk zone for places like Kansas City, Missouri, Burlington there on the Iowa-Illinois border, over to Chicago, Illinois, even as far east as Detroit, Michigan. As indicated here on this playthrough by the European model, there is set to be an intense amount of storm fuel making its way north into parts of the risk zone. This is one reason the risk is level 1 to level 2 over such a broad area. Daytime heating and other ingredients will come together to fuel up these 2,000 to 4,000 joules per kilogram readings of CAPE, that is convective available potential energy. Whenever you have that amount of storm fuel in place, that is definitely at least a moderate to high amount of energy that will definitely help in supporting stronger storm updrafts. Zooming in on some high resolution guidance, you can see the HRRR model indicates that roads could be wet over some parts of the Midwest and lower Great Lakes around the risk zone on Friday morning's commute. These are leftover storms set to be moving through from overnight Thursday night. Even into the mid-morning time frame of Friday, we could have some of these storms lingering around. Some could try to re-strengthen, especially over on the east side of Lake Michigan into the afternoon. That's why there is a slight risk, I think, for places like Lansing and Detroit. Back to the west, though, the storms are going to leave behind what is called a mesoscale convective vortex. That is an area of spin created by an older cluster of thunderstorms. That acts as an area of low pressure in its own right, and it's going to create a little mini front, if you want to consider it that. That is going to help in producing the higher coverage of storms we likely see out of eastern Nebraska and eastern Kansas, and then through the rest of the marginal and slight risk zones east of there into the evening. Damaging winds and hail are set to be in higher coverages in these zones for that very region. You can see Cedar Rapids, Davenport, Rockford, Milwaukee. These are some of the areas where we could not only see that severe weather, but also the training heavy rainfall getting going. There could be a brief tornado, although these storms do look to cluster together fast enough that I would assume wind and hail will be the main threats. Back out into the upper Midwest, the high plains, down into parts of Texas and Oklahoma where we have the marginal severe weather threat. Storms will be widespread at times into the evening, but none of this looks to be too intense, especially for a plains severe weather setup there. Here is a sudden break in the video as I give you the reminder to hit the like button if you have not already. Also make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Here's a few seconds of dead air while you do that, so you don't even have to pause the video. Oh, while you're at it, check out the weather ball link below. Taking a closer look at the rainfall expected from early Friday morning through the very early part of Saturday, you can see that the Friday and Friday night storms will leave a smattering of some heavier rainfall totals over some parts of the east. In many cases, flooding will be very isolated, and it will especially target areas where there has been a lot of rain just in the last several days. The flooding threat will be more concentrated as you go on up here into particularly the Midwest, where we get those storms training along into the south of that likely mesoscale convective vortex. Locally, high totals in parts of Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois could exceed an inch or two and get closer to 3 to 4 inches. That could definitely cause scattered and flooding events. I do intend to break down the Saturday and Saturday night storm setup in a video that I will likely post on Friday. For now, though, let's just take a general look at future radar as anticipated by the GFS model's broad picture for our Saturday evening. You can see that it indicates various areas where thunderstorms could pop up in higher quantities. Overall, though, there is going to be some various clusterings of storms from the South Central Plains part of the risk zone over to the mid-Mississippi Valley, parts of the northern Ohio Valley region, and then even on up into parts of Michigan. The fact that it's not indicating a lot of storms over Michigan doesn't mean that there couldn't be a few stronger ones. That's why the Storm Prediction Center has a site risk in place. The atmosphere looks primed up for the storms to be the strongest when they fire up from Bay City down to Detroit. Zooming in on the flooding potential according to the Weather Prediction Center's rainfall totals from Saturday morning through early Sunday morning, you can see that especially the south central U.S. part of the severe weather risk zone also needs to be on the lookout for some isolated scattered flooding. Many zones that I have circled from New Mexico and Texas, as well as Oklahoma, into parts of southern Kansas and Missouri, need to be on the lookout for at least a half an inch of rain. Many spots will get closer to an inch or two, with locally higher amounts closer to 3 to 4 inches. Definitely be on the lookout for, again, isolated or scattered flooding as a result of that. Further northeast along the front, storms will be a little bit more sparse in nature, but there could definitely be some 1 inch plus totals out of the heavier storms that will result in isolated bouts of flooding. All right, we talked enough about storms. Let's talk about some of the temperature trends as a result of the frontal passages moving across the country in the coming days. As we go into the weekend, the general temperature trend is going to be warmer in the east ahead of that impending cold front, especially where the ridge will be more prominent in the jet stream and abnormal in places like Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and Vermont. Saturday into early Sunday will bring well above average temperatures. 10 to 15 degrees above average can be expected at times there. On the flip side, it will be 10 to 15 degrees below average at times over some parts of the central and north central U.S., where the cold front will have just passed through. Back to the west of that dip in the jet stream and associated cold front, there will be warmer air rising back on up through parts of the west, and that will likely be the next warm-up that starts moving east by the time we get into next week. Before we get to those weekend trends, we do have to get through Friday. You can see that it will still be a warm day, as the front will not have yet passed through places like the Central Plains and the Midwest, all the way as far north as Nebraska, Iowa, and Illinois. 90s will help in increasing that storm fuel. There will be a lot of near 90-degree readings all the way on over to the east coast from there, and there will be plenty of 90s in triple digits back through the valleys out west. We will only see that western warmth in the valleys intensifying into Saturday, but look at the cool down. There it is, diving on down. Some of the 80s and the low 90s you see through a lot of Texas, even those, though they don't look below average on the graphic due to the darker shades, they are below average for this time of the year. 70s and 80s up into the upper Midwest with some lower humidity. That's going to feel nice behind the front into the weekend. Ahead of the front, though, it will still be warm. 90s all the way as far north as the lower and southeastern shores of the Great Lakes on Saturday. On Sunday, we'll see the 80s and 90s around the East Coast. You can still see that general cool down that will be behind the front. A lot of low and mid 80s in the cool down region. With that being said, that's all I have for today's update. Make sure that you are answering the question of the day involving the Weather Photo Wars Round 1 if you have not already. Do you like the illuminated cumulus cloud or the shadowy cumulus cloud better? Drop that answer down in the comments section. Also, make sure that you are hitting that like button and you are subscribed to the channel, as I reminded you earlier. With that being said, that's all I have. God bless you all. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next update tomorrow.
One nation weather.